Here you go. Satin black. That's what we used right there. And that is a satin black urethane. 3 to 1 to 1. So 3 parts this, 1 part that. Whatever reducer, urethane reducer, it is a urethane. Be careful with this stuff. I was reading online, it looked like you could get like an acrylic. Probably not going to hold up the best. Urethane is pretty tough, so that's what we went with. And that's all I use is urethane on most applications anyway. But how smooth did we get her? Because she is black. Let's just do the quick walk around. And maybe we'll go over the pros and cons a little bit. I'll probably forget. I'm just happy to get this one done and out of my hair. I'm going to miss it though, because I like the look of the car now. And by the time I get them to where they're nice, a day or two later, they're gone. But that's her. Still got a little bit of tape here to pull off. We're going to throw the mirrors and signal lights on. The owner will drive it home, and he's got all the trim and stuff to... Just a little bit of trim he's putting back on. So this is the effect. So it's not flat black, it's a satin. And what that means, let me get up real close. There's a wee bit of texture. Here, let's do this just so it'll focus. Well, look, you can see the dust already magnetized to it, eh? But you can wash this. A little bit of soap and water, dry it off with the terry cloth so you don't get water spots. That's it. I mean, you could technically clean it with a little bit of water and a few shop towels. Now, if you're going off-roading and doing all that stuff, I don't know. I'm talking like, treating it like a hot rod, driving it around, a little bit of rain or whatever, I don't think you're going to hurt it too much. It is a urethane, and it has a little bit of a skin. Now, the problem with flat blacks, if they're true flat blacks, it's basically overspray. It's like a sponge, so you touch it, there's dirt. You can't wash it off. You basically just pressure wash it and walk away and hope for the best. But anyway, so this satin black urethane, and probably any satin black enamel or urethane, the pros are it's a flat black that you can wash. It kind of hides some stuff, but when people say that, keep this in mind. Flat black hides a lot. Once you get this sheen, because it's not a reflection, but it does have a sheen to it. You can see the dark to light as, the shadows go around. It's kind of cool, but it's washable. It hides stuff a little bit. Where the flat black, it hides everything because you get almost no sheen whatsoever, like it's chalkboard. And it gets ratty real quick. This will look just like this for quite some time. Like, will it dull out? I've done a lot of the Mopars where we do the decals around the back and the hood, stuff like that, anything with a satin black stripe. I'm not a sticker guy. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Just, I use this stuff. Hasn't been a problem. Now, this is the first full car I've done with it. The last time I painted something, it was a different type of satin, and we had to basically use a regular black, and we poured a bunch of stuff in it. And it was a flattener, so you had to be careful with so many drops, I believe it was. Because if you overdo it, then it'll go flat, and then you want to make sure every mixing cup is exactly the same, or you'll have like shiny spots and flatter spots. Now, we did that, and it was on race cars, and we weren't real particular, but it didn't lay down as nice as this. So putting this down, if you've painted before, I don't know if this is the best thing to practice with. If you get overspray too much haze or you don't keep it wet, you will have spots that look a little flatter, and you will notice them. Medium wet, coat number 1. And I'd say more wet than medium. And the nice thing is I've got no runs anywhere. This stuff doesn't run, which is good. And I'll get to why when we talk about the cons. But you can put it on pretty liberally. and it doesn't seem to run. And then the second coat, you basically run the gun the same. Now I ran a, what did I use? A ProTech 4500, which is, you know, it's got a real wide fan on it. We turned it in a little bit, but basically we did a medium wet coat. And on the second coat, we ran the gun the same way, but I slowed it down a little bit, because once you got that stuff on there and it starts to flash off and stuff, it'll kind of glue the second coat on, and you shouldn't get a run. And it didn't. But you got to do that full wet coat on the last coat, and the reason why, it's got the consistency of, can you see it? There we go. It's like an eggshell. Now, it's not a bumpy eggshell, it's pretty smooth. And I mean, I got to get really close to see that. And even by eye standing here looking at the car, I mean, it is what it is. It's a cool finish if you're into that. Now, here's the con to something like this. There's no fixing this that I'm aware of. Now, maybe you can airbrush a bit on and melt it, but I think you're going to see the repair. So you'd be dedicated in this case where somebody messed up the door, you're repainting the door. And it should look exactly the same when it dulls out and does its thing. You know, if a fender gets... So if you ruin something or you're not happy with something, you're going to paint the panel. So keep that in mind. Now, in most cars, you can paint a panel. But, you know, there's a lot of cars where the quarters and the roof are all one, so you'd have to go all the way around. So maybe make sure you do that well. Now, dust nibs, little spots. We're going to show you one right here on the trunk, because I'm not hiding nothing with this. Can you see? Now, I believe... Hang on. Is the camera going to pick it up? Well, this is a real pain in the... There you go. That's like a little dot of paint. Now, you can barely see it, and I had to fight to get it. Now, from way back here, camera won't pick it up. Well, I lost it. But at any rate, the odd little blob of paint, you know, coming out of the gun or whatever, or if you get a little dirt nib, a little bit of something right there. Wanted to show you that because it was easy to see. Now, walking by the car, I don't see it, but if I come real close, it's like, well, there's a little bit. But that's the thing. So when you paint this stuff, your expectations, you can funnel the paint all you want. Like, we had a little bit of trash, obviously, in the paint is what I think happened on that one spot. And maybe it blew out of the car, which is more likely what happened. But my point is, dirt nibs, anything like that, you can't fix. Now, we had those little spots over there, whatever they were, and then a couple little droplets here and there, but nothing too crazy. But I mean, the finish is what the finish is, and you got to live with it. You can play with it and try to fix it. I don't really think it's going to lend itself well to that. You can't cut and buff this. It's satin. You cut and buff it, you're going to have shiny spots. So you leave it alone. It is what it is. So you're never going to get that 100% perfect job. And look, I'm not saying this is bad. This is really nice. You know, so keep your expectations real. Like, if you're looking for a $100,000 paint job in satin black, well, here's what I would do for a job like that. I'd price that in the budget in a way that I could paint the car piece by piece. And if I get anything messed up, we're going to wet sand it and shoot another coat on. That's the only way you're going to achieve that, with a little bit of luck. I mean, I've been in really rough booths, as you can see right here. And I've been in expensive booths. You're going to get nubs. You're going to get the odd speck of dirt. You're going to get stuff. That's just a fact of the trade. You know, people say, no, I've seen on TV and the guy doesn't get that. No, that's bullshit. That's a guy who did the job and then later they cut and buffed it. The whole point is, you want your booth, whatever booth it is, to be really, really clean. Before I shot this car, I grabbed a hose and we soaked the whole booth just a garden hose, no pressure washer, nothing crazy. We took a garden hose with a really good nozzle, and we just blasted the whole booth soaking wet, you know, cleaned everything that we could, swept the hell out of the floor and washed it and everything a couple of times. And wash, I'm talking, we sprayed the hell out of it with a hose, right? You know, you could mop and bucket it. We didn't go that crazy. Now, you're probably wondering about, oh, what about all the black? It'll just kind of wear off, and within a week that'll all be gone. I'm not even worried about it. Now, wetting the floor. Let's hit that real quick. I wet my floor. Not because I paint with my floor wet. I wet the floor ahead of time, and sometimes I'll do it even twice. And then I'll let my fan run while I'm prepping everything. So by the time I get in here to paint, the floor's damp. There might be the odd little bit of a puddle in a few places, but it's not soaking wet. And the reason why, see, I have one spot where it'll puddle back here, and it's still wet. But other than that spot, everywhere else looks more like that. It's just wet. So once you've done this, dust doesn't seem to come off it. Once you've wet it and it dries, like, it's good. The reason I don't like a soaking wet floor, and I used to be a guy who'd wet his floor and paint right over it. And you'd see a skin of paint or whatever on top of the water and the puddles. Like I said, I have an area here that's low that usually puddles. You can almost see a clean spot there. So that stays a little bit wetter. But usually I wait till it starts to dry and it's only damp. And the reason why, you're going around the car and you're chasing the wet. Like in this case, how did I paint this car? So we started at the back. First thing I painted was that. And we came right around the edge. And I came right up to this edge and I let it overshoot a little bit. And then we painted the trunk. We painted this spot. We painted the inside of the lights, basically this way on the corridor and that way. And what we did is we came right around and let it bleed off. Now, while that was still wet and heavy, and I put quite a bit on back here because I knew I wouldn't get at it right away, we then came to our roof, which is technically separate, but we painted these with it. So I already had this done, so I caught that wet and I drug it up, went so far across the roof, side to side, another here, and then here. And the reason why I say that, look, I'm not tall enough to get over this car. Now, we had the rockers up away from the floor on jack stands, so I had 2 step ladders in here. That's how I painted this particular car. Now, once the roof was done, we caught the front edge of the windshield. That's just crap from, it was stuck in the tape, as you can see there. I got to pull that yet. So once we got our roof done, we come back to the driest side, and we pulled our whole quarter, and we went right up into the door. Then I went to the other side, because we caught the wet back there, and did the same thing. We also caught the wet here as we came across. You get the idea, right? Then once we got to here, we do the other side. We come back, catch that wet in the door, bring it right past and up into the fender, but it also gives us a chance to do this while this is still hopefully wet enough. And then once that was done, we hit these edges while that was still wet. Then we hit our hood. Actually, sorry, not the hood, the fender. I usually hit the top spot edge, then I'll go down here, do a round, and then I work my way up and over, which means we hit that twice, right? Because I did just a couple here, move to here, bring it up and in, and overshot onto the hood a little bit. That won't run, it's pretty flat there. Now that's with this particular paint. It's not running and I know I can pull that off. So then I do the same with this one. We do that spot, catch the edge of the fender. Now on the first coat, we actually hit the inner edge of the fender before we shut it so that it would go to what we had jammed out before. And then again, come from the bottom, go around the front, and then I just keep bringing it up, running it this way. Now, you don't want to get shadowing or weirdness. So on my second coat, I actually ran it, you know, on like a 30-degree angle up to the top edge. And then I came across and did my top edge, went into that wet spot, and then passed. Then I went back to that side and caught the wet of the hood, and I took the whole thing this way. And overshot it here, and caught the wet from basically light to light. You get the idea. You got to plan a paint job, because if you don't, you'll have a dry spot. And a dry spot on this car, I'm not sure what it would look like. I think I turned out pretty okay. If this was a glossy car, I think right here there would be a little bit of a blur in it. But because it's this stuff, I think we're okay. And if we ever have a spot there, if it ever looks weird or different out in the sun, I'm simply going to plastic off the whole entire car and repaint that fender. So, the pro and the con, you're going to get the same finish if you shoot it at the same, relatively within the same pressure. I painted this whole car at about 28.5, 29, according to my 3M gauge. And I mean, that'll change depending on what gun you use. I used the ProTech 4500, and it worked just fine. The car looks amazing. The roof looks good. We're happy with the car. So you can see there, we used a flat black product and did all the jams ahead of time. And the reason why is because the customer's going to do that later when he replaces these rubbers. As you can see, they're pretty nasty. But we left that blue in there, so if he wants to take it in, he can. It gives him the option. The only thing about that is we wanted it clean enough that you could show off the car and use it. So we taped it off here right on the line from where the paint was wore. So we have a nice break, because one thing he wanted to keep, the original paint of the dash. The doors you don't see at all. They're completely covered and wrapped when he puts his interior on. We left those because they kind of go with the dash. And that was just, we figured this would be a good way to kind of finish it off and keep the blue and the black, because you don't want this blue inside, right? You don't want to see that when you shut your door. You want black and black. But yeah, all the rubber's got to be done. So this is stuff he can do easily on his own. He was hoping to keep the costs down. It's a funny thing too, because people like to keep the costs down and they don't necessarily realize all the work. Now, this owner's had the car a long time, but he remembers the old school body jobs from years ago where you just slap a bunch of fill, fix the spots, paint the car. This car was nothing but dings and dents. Now, I'm not saying that they're all gone, but they're gone enough that this is a very respectable car now. Things don't line up 100%, but they're pretty good. Good enough for the color we put on the car. Now, if this car was gloss black, we'd have to put G2 filler or something similar on the whole car, real fat, and block the whole car again. But the customer had a plan and what he wanted, and I think it's a cool vision. I like the car. Trunk lid's not closed. That's why she's up like that. But our quarters had a lot of work, and they're smooth. This door had a ton of work, and it's just as smooth as the one on the other side. In fact, this door turned out really, really well for what it was. It had a few big dents, and then there was a panel lap welded on there. So we refilled it all and fixed it, and it is nice. And this fender, we did quite a bit of work on, and it turned out nice. Now, one thing we had to do, this fender, which we thought was good, we fixed the top and the front and bottom, but all in this area. When we were blocking it before paint, turned out it was super duper lumpy. Luckily, I had enough primer on there that we got most of it out. And it is pretty good. There's a wee little bit of a ding somewhere back here, but it's so minor that it's... you can kind of see it right there, catching the edge of the light to the left. So that's acceptable. We're okay with that. Anyway, that's her. That's the car. We like it. It's going to go down the road just fine. And another pro to doing something like this, it's obviously different. It's not at all what everybody else has at the car show. So when you go to the fair and you go to the small car shows and Cars and Coffee, I found when you do something different like this, something that's kind of throwback, but The wheels make it kind of come into the today, but it's very, 50s, 60s hot rod. This thing's going to draw a crowd. People are going to love this car. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.